Hey all, Chobo here. Welcome to another video. We're going to be talking about stocks to consider in this, in brackets, upcoming crisis. I don't know how many takes I've been taking. This is probably like the 20th take just because I've been talking so long and dragging everything out. So I want to keep this one a bit more simple and a bit more shorter as well. So hopefully I did that properly. Why is the upcoming in a bracket? Because I think we are in a crisis, but it is not easy to tell until we're in the middle of it. So I'm gonna just put that in brackets just to leave the controversy behind. Now, everything I am going to be talking about is based on long-term gains, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So please remember that. Nothing in the stock market really should be for the short term. And this is not financial advice. I'm not an expert. I'm an amateur as well. And I just love reading the news and summarizing facts from all these sources and kind of aggregating them to make decisions on what to buy and what to sell maybe. I have a presentation here for you today. Let's go straight into it. So, stocks to consider for 2020 and 2021. I'll be talking more of them in terms of sectors and what kind of sectors may have been heavily impacted by COVID-19 and the financial situation we have here, and why they might be a pretty good pick, with some company examples to give you an idea of what the sector actually contains. So we'll get straight into it. Companies directly affected by COVID-19. Now, it is obvious that these companies would be heavily impacted in terms of share price, and this is appealing for investors, not just existing, because it's so cheap that people who thought these companies were too expensive to invest for some reasons are no longer that expensive. So it would attract a lot of new investors as well. When COVID-19 hit New Zealand and we went into a lockdown, a lot of companies didn't look so great. They were heavily impacted. For example, Air New Zealand was probably one of the most affected because they had to cancel like 90% of their flights, and obviously their revenue streams are not looking that great. They weren't looking so great even before COVID-19 hit. Pretty unfortunate for them. Their share price did plummet a bit and they eventually got bailed out by the government. So $900 million to them. Not looking so great for shareholders at the moment, but for people who want to pick them up, it's a pretty good time to have a look into it. Auckland Airport, same thing. A lot of the airlines, not just Air New Zealand, has cancelled their flights to and from New Zealand. So obviously there is no doubt about it that Auckland Airport is going to feel some pain there in terms of their revenue stream, and it has been represented in their share price, and they went down to like 50%, 60% at their lowest of the all-time highs, but they did rebound a bit. But in the short term, I don't really have good beliefs on the share price appreciating for these companies, especially because they are going to be continuously impacted during the lockdown at least. And even after the lockdown, it is a very controversial discussion or topic to talk about of if they're actually going to appreciate in a V-shaped recovery or not. It is very debatable. Entertainment companies like Sky City, they do require social interactions like the casino, and obviously they shut down for good reasons. They are reinforcing what the government is strongly recommending for everyone to stay home, and that is no exception for the casino. And obviously their revenue streams would have been cut quite a bit, and they will be staying like that for the next few weeks or maybe in the next few months. So that's not looking so great, but their share price is plummeting due to the reasons. Retail services like food services and stuff like that, they're not looking so great. Only the essential businesses are open at the moment. And Kathmandu is probably one of the worst performers during this time. Yeah, their share price plummeted quite a bit, and they had some trading halts, and they had some news come out, and it's not looking so great. But because it's such an iconic New Zealand brand for outdoor clothing and stuff like that, is it really gonna go down and bankrupt? Probably not. I don't think the government wants that as well, because they do represent New Zealand pretty nicely in for what they do in their brand. So it is interesting to see what happens to Kathmandu, but I think that's a really nice company to have a look into if you want nice cheaper stocks. Blue chip companies, they're always a good bet to buy, especially if they're going down. It's a heavy buy-in for a lot of these companies because they have a good track record history of dividend payouts and their share price not being so volatile compared to other companies. We're looking at companies like New Zealand top 10, 20, and maybe in some in the top 50 as well. So a lot of these companies been around for the past few decades, and it's a nice company to pick up, especially for like Spark and FNP Healthcare, Banks, Air New Zealand, Auckland Airport. Those were all blue chip companies, and A2 Milk as well. A lot of the blue chip companies are not heavily impacted even right now, like Spark and FNP Healthcare. FNP Healthcare in fact hit their all-time highs recently as well, so just because their product line pretty much assists the current COVID-19 pandemic situation. So that's pretty nice one for people who've been holding these stocks because they haven't depreciated in price too much. The only ones that depreciated quite a lot amongst the blue chips would be the banks and the travel ones like Air New Zealand, Auckland Airport. So that is something to consider, just because they do hold their value relatively well compared to other companies. Pretty good dividend payouts for most cases. I mean, pretty sure Air New Zealand and Auckland would have cancelled their dividend payouts for obvious reasons, but it's not a normal thing to see the travel industry just die off like that. But we do have a pathogen on the loose. Utility companies like energy companies, they don't get affected that much, especially in a time like this, just because people still use energy and fuel even during a lockdown situation like now. People still using their phones, their TVs, computers at home, their home appliances, and they all require energy. And obviously their cash flow isn't gonna decrease that much, just because the people are still around using energy, and there's no simpler way to explain that. So Meridian, Genesis, and Mercury, they're looking all right. They did take a dip, generally because of the market trend of New Zealand as a whole and globally as well, but in the long term they're not looking too bad at all. Actually, Z Energy is a bit of a hard one just because they're based on fuel, and we did have an oil price war recently, and that's still not looking so great. So it is quite interesting to see what Z Energy would do, but they had a pretty good dip, so it is a good time to have a look into that right now. Public transport, there's not that many companies that are publicly listed for these ones, but maybe like Infratil is part of it. But nonetheless, those are still operating. They did probably take a pretty big hit in terms of revenue, but they are mostly funded or backed up by the government because it's a general need for most people. So those would be pretty nice ones to pick up as well. Telecommunication is probably one of the most unaffected in terms of revenue stream, just because people are probably relying more on their broadband and their phones and their text messages, especially in a lockdown time right now. And Telstra and Spark are looking pretty good, especially like Spark. I haven't checked Telstra, but Spark has been retaining their values pretty well. They did have a dip, but they did recover quite a bit. That would be a pretty good one to pick up because they're not generally impacted at all unless all their infrastructure starts dying or something like that. But if that's not the case, they're a pretty good buy. Healthcare and retirement, it's a bit of a controversial one just because the pandemic situation is a medical issue, and if any of these healthcare or retirement village operators have COVID-19 cases coming up in their facilities, then it's not looking so great for them. So FNP Healthcare is quite a different one just because they make products especially for COVID-19, that actually does help a bit. So their share price has been appreciating. EBOS, they're like distributors and wholesalers of medical products and like healthcare products, and even I think they have like animates and stuff like that as well. So that's a pretty interesting one. I think EBOS is not a bad idea. It is like a large cap company, so that's an interesting one. Bliss is a small cap company in the healthcare industry. They make like probiotics or something like that. It is a alright gamble to take, maybe. They are pretty cheap in general. They didn't get impacted that much from the current situation, so it's an interesting one. They're holding their value pretty well, and I'm really interested to see where they're gonna head towards. I think they have a lot of good potential. So I got distracted by my aunt, so let me do that again. Albano is heavily impacted by the current lockdown situation because they are like got luminos and stuff like that, and obviously they're not operating right now unless it's an emergency. So their revenue would be heavily impacted, especially with the deal they had with Bidco, was it? Bidco. So they did have a deal going on late last year to be bought out or something like that, and that didn't go that well, and their share price has been heavily impacted by the news of the deal falling apart. So that's another one that you might want to look into, because it is a small to mid cap ish company that has seen recent dips. Retirement villages, as I said, Ryman, Somerset, and Oceania. If any COVID-19 cases come out in their facilities, not looking so great. So it's a bit of a gamble in the short term, but in the long term, with the aging population increasing, it is not a bad buy for any time in the next year. So I would be looking into it, but I would be staying away from these ones for the wee while, just until COVID-19 does get contained a bit. It is a bit of a hard one there. Small cap companies is the last one I want to talk about. Not going to go into too much detail. It is a bit of a gamble, these ones. These normally have more room to grow in the next several years to decades. For example, I have like here Bliss and Plexure. Those two are one of my two favorite small cap companies that I would want to invest to again. In the meanwhile, I am going to be looking into investing into some of these companies. Maybe it's a bit of like a high risk high reward situation here, and I think those two would be the two potentially good ones, in my opinion, for anyone who's interested in small cap companies. Please remember, it is high risk, and we just don't know what's going to happen to these companies just because they don't have a really good track history record. And if they work out well, they'll give you a lot of gains, but it's not guaranteed. There's no stability. It's very volatile in most cases, so it is a bit of a gamble in that kind of aspect. So please do remember the risk involved here. If you liked today's video, please give me that thumbs up. Put a comment down below what you thought. If you have any topics you want me to cover, please let me know, and I'll see if I can cover it if I know a lot about it at least. Please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next update, and until next time, I'll see you around.